Black Friday sales have started, so I went and I took the opportunity to go and get some more keyboard stuff. This is my order from KBD Fans. It has got some, shit in here. All right, desk mat. I'm pretty sure these are my switches, and so this is GMK Extended 2048. The dark base. This is a keycap set that I wanted for a future build. Let's take a look at the desk mat. I like this a lot. By the way, can I rant a little bit about GMK keycaps? They're really good. I'm not saying they're bad. They're good caps, but man, they're expensive. I think this set was like 150 USD or something like that, which kind of sucks. If you get paid in yen, I guess, like I do, because the value of the yen is just so bad right now. Anyways, what I really wanted to talk about were these. Oh wow, they're all individually packaged in sets of 10. These are silent switches, and in particular, these are the Gateron 0 degree silent linear switch. Okay, so let's talk about what makes a keyboard sound like the way that it does. This is kind of putting it very, very simply, but the sound profile of a keyboard is kind of determined by three major things, right? So first off is going to be the sound of the board itself. What is the board made of? Is it a polycarbonate board? Is it an aluminum board, or brass? Whatever. The materials and the density of the materials and how sound travels and how force travels through that board is going to change the way that board sounds. Second is going to be the sound of the switch, when the switch physically bottoms out, when the stem of that switch kind of hits the bottom housing. What does that sound like, and how is force distributed through the switch itself? Third is going to be the sound of the keycap that you're using, or your keycaps. But it's kind of those three things that kind of determine what exactly your board sounds like. Silent switches are made in such a way that they mitigate the sound and the force itself of your key press. When you bottom out, when you fully depress the switch and that stem hits the bottom housing, silent switches are made a little bit differently to mitigate and absorb as much of that sound and impact as possible. So silent switches do come in a bunch of different varieties, but they all try to solve the same problem in some way. And it's usually with some kind of dampening on the inside of the housing or on the stem or whatever, like a silicone dampener. So for example, these are the Kale deep sea silent switches, and if you open it up, you'll see that there's a little bit of a silicone pad at the bottom of the switch here, where the bottom housing is. So when you fully depress the switch, when the stem hits the bottom, this pad will absorb a lot of that impact and a lot of that sound, which will then result in a softer typing feel and a quieter overall sound when you bottom out your switch. Silent switches do kind of have their drawbacks though. And one of the major criticisms of silent switches in general is that it's just because of the dampening mechanism inside most switches, it leads to a softer typing feel, or what is frequently described as a mushy typing feel. And a lot of people just don't like that very much. So switch manufacturers can try to get around this basically just by changing where the dampening occurs. In the case of the deep sea silent switches, the dampening pad was at the bottom of the housing inside the switch. So, once you bottom out, it would feel a little mushy or soft. So the 0 degree silent linear switches, in comparison, instead of having one giant big, dampening pad on the inside of the housing, on the top housing here, they have these two very tiny shoulder dampeners that are kind of inside the housing. And in theory, when you release your switch, when the stem rebounds, that should kind of disrupt or kind of mitigate a lot of the force of your switch rebounding. And then on the kind of on the bottom housing here, they have these four very, very, very tiny dampeners as well. And these are on the outside of the switch. So again, instead of having one big pad that's on the inside of your switch, the 0-degree silent linears instead have these smaller pads on the top and bottom housing. So in theory, what that means is when you depress your switch or when you bottom out your switch, you shouldn't be met with like a mushy feel at the bottom of that keystroke. It should feel more like a traditional, let's call it like a more normal linear switch. So even in the same keyboard with the same keycaps, silent switches do make a bit of a difference. They do kind of make a big difference, I would say, even. So if you're trying to make the keyboard a little bit quieter and don't really mind too much of the major drawbacks of a silent switch, yeah, go ahead, give them a try. You might prefer them, you might like them. You might not care that they feel mushy. And if you do care that they are mushy, like you can try to find a switch like the 0 degrees where they have the dampening pads just located somewhere else. All right, I guess that's really it. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.